Hey guys, tonight we slip into a wooden chair tucked in the corner of a dusty workshop where the scent of pine shavings floats like an old lullaby. It's late, the kind of late where even the clocks feel sleepy. You run your fingers along a carved wooden toy, a rabbit on wheels worn soft at the edges from 1,000 tiny hands. Somewhere beneath a creaky floorboard or behind a drawer that sticks waits the first seed of a quiet fortune. A fortune not shouted about in headlines or splashed across sports cars, but whispered through royalty checks and trickling dividends, all born from the mind of a toy maker who simply didn't want to work forever. Of course, most people never make it past the idea stage. You've probably had that thought yourself. Wouldn't it be nice to make money while I sleep? But let's be honest. You probably won't survive the execution part, not because you're lazy, but because modern life is designed to distract you away from systems and back into cycles. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it? Over there, I always love seeing how far this sleepy little show can reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The attic is warmer than it should be. An old radiator ticks in the corner like a metronome left behind. You're standing in socks on a wooden floor surrounded by small creations, whirligigs, jack-in-the-boxes, wind-up turtles. Everything handmade, nothing mass-produced. The kind of workshop where magic smells faintly of varnish and glue. He wasn't rich, not at first. Just a man with a slight stoop and nimble fingers carving dreams into oak blocks while the city below rattled on with its hustle. You watch him work without rush. He sands edges like he's polishing time itself. One toy per day, maybe two. This isn't business yet. This is refuge. But here's the strange thing. Most empires don't start with ambition. They begin with obsession. With someone solving a small problem for themselves or creating a delight no one else bothered to build. The toy maker wanted something more timeless than money. He wanted freedom. But he understood he couldn't build freedom in a day, which brings us to our first principle: delayed gratification. Not the kind where you wait to eat the marshmallow. The kind where you forego speed for craft. Where you build something the slow way on purpose because you know shortcuts won't age well. Consider this. In medieval times, monks used cocoa beans as currency. They didn't melt them, didn't eat them, just carried them around like sacred coins. It sounds absurd until you realize value is always defined by agreement. The toy maker didn't chase fast profits. He chased things people agreed to love. Now, that attic may seem like a cute little footnote, but here's where things get curious. The toys started selling. Not wildly, just enough. Parents in the neighborhood would pass by the crooked window and see something whimsical. Word spread slowly, like syrup down a spoon. Orders trickled in, not enough to get rich, but enough to start wondering, what if? Here's where economists start bickering. Was it skill? Was it timing? Was it niche appeal? Academics still argue whether the first wave of passive income is earned or inherited by personality. But while they argue, the toy maker just keeps carving. One more giraffe, one more train, one more quiet step toward leverage. Leverage, in this case, doesn't mean borrowing money. It means creating something once that sells 1,000 times. And the toy maker stumbles upon this without knowing the term. You see it in the way he saves every template, every sketch. He doesn't just make toys, he documents the making of toys. And somewhere deep in a notebook that smells like mothballs and ambition, the idea starts to take shape. You don't just sell toys, you sell the system that makes toys. You license joy. There's a humming in your ears now, like the fan you forgot to turn on or the sound of potential warming up in the corners of your mind. And here's a sleepy little metaphor for you. Imagine planting a tree that grows marzipan apples. Every year the apples drop. You collect them. Some fall into your pocket, others into your future. At first, it feels slow. You wonder if the soil's wrong. But one day, you look up and realize you've built an orchard without breaking a sweat. Passive income is rarely sexy in the beginning. It's often slow. It's sometimes awkward. And it always starts with creating more than you consume. Back in the attic, the toy maker is wrapping a wooden swan in brown paper. He hums a lullaby in a language you don't know. There's no rush, there's no announcement. But something's shifting. The orders double this month, then again next month. Not from ads, not from tricks, just from charm, from quiet excellence. And this is when he does something most people wouldn't. He doesn't scale immediately. He waits. He watches. He tests which toys people come back for. He writes down why. He asks parents what they loved and what broke. That's not passivity. That's patient, active learning. And that's where the seeds of empire really begin. You sit down in the rocking chair by the window. There's a toy horse on the sill carved from birch. Its legs are jointed slightly crooked, but it rocks with a rhythm you can't quite resist. You feel your breath slow. The radiator ticks once like a punctuation mark. You think of that cocoa bean again, of monks in robes trading candy for candles. You think of how strange it is that every economy starts with belief, and how every empire starts with one dusty room where someone believed just a little longer than everyone else. And as you lean back, eyes heavy, you hear the floor creak. Not from footsteps, just from history adjusting itself. The window rattles gently in its frame as if nodding along to the toy maker's steady rhythm. You're still sitting there in the attic, where the light slants just right through dusty panes, watching as he wraps another creation in soft brown paper and ties it with string that frays at the ends. It's not packaging, it's a ritual. Every knot tied the same way, every corner tucked with care. You get the sense he's not just sending off toys, he's sending off little pieces of himself. And that's when the ticking really starts to matter. Not just the radiator's stubborn clank, but the way each cuckoo clock on the shelf ticks in its own peculiar tempo. You almost don't notice it at first. But then, the room feels like it's breathing in slow, mechanical unison. Tick, tick, tock. A lullaby disguised as timekeeping. Here's what you start to understand. Compound interest and time move in the same rhythm. You can't hear them until you slow down. You can't see them until you stop chasing. The toy maker begins keeping a small ledger, not to obsess, but to observe. A log of every purchase, every repeat customer, every delayed payment. There's nothing high-tech about it. No charts, no apps. Just handwritten numbers in the margins of a life lived slowly. You see the first note Mrs. Langley bought 2 ducks, paid in cash. Said she'd be back for the giraffe. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, Mrs. Langley returned, bought giraffe, gave cookies. It's ridiculous. And it's brilliant. Because it's not just a list of sales, it's a record of trust compounded. Financial principle. Occur 2. Trust is interest-bearing. When someone buys from you once and returns, it's not the product. It's the belief. And belief scales when you don't rush the math. You glance at one of the cuckoo clocks. It's carved with tiny leaves and owls. The little bird peeks out, yawns, probably then retreats without drama. No need to announce anything. That's what passive income is supposed to feel like, expected magic. Not the big payout, but the steady tick, the quiet return. Now, here's your quirky fact for the night. In 17th century Holland, certain towns used tulip bulbs as collateral for loans. Yes, tulips. People mortgaged their homes on the future value of flower bulbs. Entire fortunes bloomed and withered before spring. Economists still can't agree whether it was mass hysteria or just speculative momentum run wild. Either way, it's a reminder value can be fragile unless it's rooted in utility or delight. The toy maker never invested in tulips. He invested in durability, not just of wood, but of joy. And you start to notice that his clocks aren't quite synchronized. Some tick slightly faster, others lag. But when you lean back and listen, not with your ears, but with your whole body, they harmonize. Like a song that only makes sense when you stop trying to pick out the melody. You hear a whisper. From the future income doesn't have to be noisy to be real. And the toy maker seems to know this. He doesn't chase trends. He just perfects the duck. You watch him adjust the wheels so they roll straighter, smoother. A full hour just sanding an axle. It feels excessive. Until you realize every minute spent refining is an hour you won't have to spend repairing. That's another layer of passive income most people miss. It's not just money that works while you sleep. It's time you don't have to spend later. But this is where doubt creeps in. There's a lull in sales that month. The phone, an old rotary thing that clicks as you dial, sits silent. He frowns, checks the ledger, wonders. Did he miss something? Is the world tired of toys? Is wooden joy obsolete? You feel it too. That small tightening in the chest when a system you've built hiccups. Maybe passive income is a myth. Maybe this attic is just a hobby with dreams attached. Here's the truth, and it's not fun. Systems fail before they succeed consistently. And yet, the toy maker doesn't pivot wildly. He doesn't launch a new line or beg for attention. He listens and notices something tiny. The customers who loved the ducks are the ones returning. So he doubles down on ducks. You smile at the absurdity. Empire of ducks. Featherless wealth. He adds a little bell to the neck. A squeak if you push hard enough. Tiny changes that feel invisible, but alter the experience entirely. You start to see what he's doing. He's not just making toys. He's designing delight that repeats. The clocks tick on. One lets out a drowsy cuckoo. You look again at the ledger. Now, it's not just customers, it's patterns. Every tick in the workshop mirrors the tick of return buyers, slow growth, subtle layers of effort that stack like bricks. The attic is darker now, lit only by a small desk lamp and the glow of your own understanding. Passive income isn't luck. It's loops. Loops you build with patience, sharpen with feedback, and trust enough to leave running while you go downstairs for tea or sleep. The toy maker finally sets down his tools, rolls his shoulders. You hear his knees pop. He stands and walks to the window, cracking it open slightly to let in the night. A breeze lifts a paper swan which glides lazily off the desk and settles in your lap. You laugh. just once, then yawn. Time is ticking gently, and for once it's on your side. Outside the window, the town hums itself to sleep. A tram squeaks by in the distance. A cat yawns on a rooftop. The breeze that drifts into the attic smells like chimney smoke, and wet cobblestone a scent you didn't know you missed. The toy maker lights a stubby candle and sits again. This time he's holding something different. A puppet. It's a little jester with felt shoes and string limbs, its grin painted slightly off-center like it knows something you don't. You watch him thread the cords, each tied to a tiny wooden crossbar. With a gentle tug, the puppet lifts a hand, then a leg, then nods as if to say, "Finally, the real money begins." You don't realize it yet, but this puppet will pay his rent for the next 3 years. Here's how it happens. A traveling theater troupe stops by town and buys a dozen of them. Then, another school orders more for a holiday play. A distant cousin writes from the capital, says the puppet made his toddler laugh. Suddenly, the toy maker has more demand than he can meet. This is the moment where most people panic. They think, I have to do it all myself, but not him. He creates a template, a precise pattern with measurements and annotations, where to drill, how to stitch, which grain of wood moves best. Then he trains a neighbor's teenage son to assemble them for a small fee per puppet. The boy works after school. The puppets multiply. And the toy maker. He spends less time building, more time designing. This right here is the slippery slope into passive income. Financial principle. Number 3. Create assets that perform without your constant touch. Every puppet made to his pattern is like a song that plays without needing him to pick up the instrument. Let's pause for a bizarre truth. In ancient Mesoamerica, Aztecs used cacao beans not just for trade, but as a wage. Warriors and civil servants were literally paid in chocolate. You'd earn a pouch of beans, then go blow it on tamales or textiles, assuming you didn't nibble your paycheck first. Economists still debate whether cacao was more valuable as food or finance. And isn't that the heart of the puppet? Is it a toy, or is it a tool? It makes children laugh, but it also funds a life. Back in the attic, the puppet's grin winks at you, and you begin to see what the toy maker sees. The puppet doesn't need him anymore. It moves on its own now, and it whispers, "Leverage me. Let me dance while you sleep." At this point, something shifts. He begins to license the puppet design to a toy store across town. Not the puppet itself, but the rights to produce it with his approval, of course. They pay a flat fee per unit. He supplies the drawings and specs. They handle the messy part, labor packaging, customer complaints. He receives a check every month like clockwork for a puppet he hasn't touched in weeks. That, my friend, is passive income in its purest wooden form. But the debate stirs again. Was he lucky? Did the puppet go viral in a pre-viral age? Or was it strategy wrapped in simplicity? Scholars still squabble about this stuff. You watch it unfold quietly in candlelight. There's a creaky drawer in the corner of the attic. You've seen it before, but now he opens it. Inside, the first failed version of the puppet. Too many strings. Limbs too stiff. Face too sad. He kept it. Not as a mistake, but as a milestone. A reminder that scalable assets often evolve from awkward origins. He calls it the prototype nobody wanted. But you notice he's smiling when he says it. He adds a small note to his ledger, January royalties from puppet license received. bought new candle extra tea and boots. That's it. No celebration, no financial freedom Instagram post, just boots. Because wealth at this stage is quiet. It's found in choice, not noise. And now, let's talk about that choice. He starts waking later, walks by the river in the mornings, learns how to bake. He even attends a puppet show in town just to see how the audience reacts. A little girl in the front row laughs so hard she snorts. That's when he knows. He's not chasing profit. He's designing joy that regenerates, joy that performs on repeat. This is where the sleepy metaphor curls back in imagine planting a joke in the soil that blooms laughter every spring. You don't need to tell the joke again. It tells itself to new ears. Passive income is that kind of magic. It whispers behind your back while you sip tea and read recipes you'll never try. You stretch in your chair. One of the cuckoo clocks clicks softly. A breeze lifts the curtain just enough to make the room feel alive. And you remember, the puppet you watched come to life now funds someone else's life. Someone who's never even met the toy maker. Just held the joy he left behind. The candle flickers once, then steadies. And somewhere in your chest, something unclenches. You don't have to rush. You just have to build what moves without you. You barely notice the candle burning lower. It's just a stub now casting a soft orange puddle across the attic floor like it's melting time itself. Shadows stretch across the walls in odd, playful shapes. Half puppet, half dream. The toy maker doesn't seem to mind. He's sitting again, this time not working, just thinking. The ledger is open beside him, and his eyes linger on a page where the numbers don't quite add up. Not in a bad way, more in a surprising way. Royalty income is steady. Custom orders are growing. But what stands out is a name repeated across pages. A shop in Vienna. A woman named Annalisa keeps ordering duck after duck, puppet after puppet. Then she asks if she can sell them in her boutique. She wants to brand them as Little Whimsies, a name so endearing it practically begs to be embroidered on a cashmere onesie. The toy maker doesn't hesitate. He says yes. But more than that, he asks for 5% of every unit she sells in exchange for exclusive use of the Whimsies name in her region. No contract. Just a letter sealed with wax and a pressed flower tucked inside. She agrees enthusiastically, and just like that, you're witnessing the next phase of his empire royalty licensing on the brand, not just the product. Financial principle. Letter 4. Own the idea, not the effort. When people want to run with your idea, let them just make sure you collect rent on the track. Somewhere between the puppet's smile and the duck's squeaky wheels, he's built something that no longer needs him present to be profitable. He's not a craftsman anymore. He's a quiet landlord of dreams. But of course, it's not all smooth. He receives a letter from a large department store in Berlin. They want to mass-produce the puppet. They'll handle everything: manufacturing, distribution, marketing. All they want is full ownership of the design. Full ownership. For a brief moment, he considers it. The money is tempting. It would be enough to retire 3 times over, live by the sea, eat pastries until his teeth fall out, maybe get a dog. But then he stares at the puppet, the way its arms dangle with just enough charm, the subtle asymmetry of its painted smile. He can't let it go. And here's your fringe financial anecdote. In 19th century France, the first vending machines sold holy water. Yup. A little coin in the slot and voila, sacred hydration. Churches installed them to control crowds and avoid fraud. Modern economists still argue whether it was genius microenterprise or divine automation gone too far. The point: not everything that can be automated should be. The toy maker turns down the Berlin offer. Instead, he creates a licensing tree. A system where other shops can sell approved puppets and ducks made to spec under a variety of charming regional names, all while paying him royalties. It's complicated, tedious even, but once set up, it works. A passive income orchard, each branch bearing fruit while he drinks tea and watches the rain blur his window. He adds a note to the ledger: declined large buyout. Open second branch license. Bought more ink. The joy he feels isn't about the money. It's about control without chaos. That's the underrated reward of slow wealth, the ability to choose your peace. He starts writing letters, real ones, long wandering paragraphs to the shopkeepers he partners with. He sends little sketches, new design tweaks, funny observations about how kids now seem to prefer ducks with mustaches. He builds relationships, not just revenue streams. And here's where uncertainty stirs again. One of the shops underperforms. Returns pile up. A small scandal brews over a duck with a loose wheel that bonked a toddler on the forehead. There's talk of refunds, reputation risk, even a potential lawsuit. The toy maker sighs. He doesn't panic, doesn't rage. He visits the shop himself, talks to the owner, inspects the ducks, reworks the axle design, offers a replacement batch free of charge. Word spreads. People say he showed up. And sales bounce back stronger than before. Because sometimes passive income still requires active integrity. You lean back and think about that one. How many people ruin the goose because they're too lazy to check on the eggs? The toy maker doesn't outsource his values, only his process. And that makes all the difference. Another cuckoo stirs. This one lets out a slow, groggy chirp like it's halfway into a dream. Maybe you are too. The candle is just a dot now, like the final pixel in an old TV set, before it fades to black. You blink slowly. The room softens at the edges. You hear his pen scratch the paper again. March royalties in. New tea tin. Fixed wheel design. Sent apology duck. Apology duck? That's a brand you'd trust forever. You smile. Because the toy maker isn't rich the way people on magazine covers are rich. He's rich in a quieter way. His wealth isn't shouting, it's ticking, softly, steadily, like a puppet dancing just off stage. Like an empire you don't need to see to believe in. The attic is darker now, the candle long gone. But moonlight slips in through the crooked window, tracing silver outlines across the floorboards and warming the toy maker's slippers. He's still there, of course, still scribbling into that battered ledger, the ink barely glinting. You notice something different. Tonight he's humming, low and tuneless, but content. He's not designing anything, not fixing anything, just reviewing. It's inventory night. You lean closer, not to count ducks or puppets, or the sad-looking wooden walrus that never sold, but to witness something richer. This is where financial sleep stories bloom best in reflection. He flips pages in his ledger, and each one is a silent monument to a decision. Not always good, not always profitable, but deliberate. Here, he notes, when he raised his licensing fee by 2 copper coins per unit, and nobody flinched. There, he recalls trying to sell musical tops that made children cry, and somewhere in the middle, tested scented puppet varnish. Never again. Financial principle. Number 5. track what matters more than money. He's not just counting coins, he's counting lessons. Now's a good time for a delightfully strange historical sidebar. In ancient China, during the Tang dynasty, rich merchants paid silence fees to neighbors, essentially hush money to ensure peace and quiet around their estates. Noise was seen as an intrusion upon wealth. A clanging pan could cost you silver. Some economists still argue whether that counts as luxury taxation or early soundproofing policy. The toy maker would have loved that. You realize he's done something similar in his own life. He's paid in peace. The empire he's built isn't loud. It doesn't buzz with urgency or flash with gold leaf logos. It ticks like a patient clock, because the more passive income he earns, the less noise he needs. This is a quiet portfolio. There's a new envelope in his lap, an offer from a bookseller in Lisbon who wants to create a picture book based on the toy maker's life. She calls it The Man Who Gave Strings Wings. The name makes him chuckle. He doesn't say yes right away. He drafts a letter with questions. Who owns the rights to the art? Will he earn per copy sold or a flat fee? Can he request the puppet's grin be slightly crooked? The Lisbon woman replies with patience and grace. She even sends a sketch of the puppet in watercolor. He agrees, on one condition, that a portion of profits go to a charity that gives toys to children in orphanages. Not because it's good branding, because he once received a wooden giraffe when he was 6 and never forgot it. This too becomes part of his portfolio, not in the financial sense, in the legacy sense, because what is legacy really? Not marble statues or plaques in museums, not viral videos or NFT ducks. It's something simpler, softer. Legacy is passive meaning. It earns love when you're no longer in the room. Uncertainty creeps in, though, as it always does. What if the book doesn't sell? What if it does too well and attracts attention he doesn't want? What if people stop caring about handmade toys altogether and want holograms or mind-linked story pods? He writes these thoughts down in the margins, then brews a cup of mint tea and forgets about them. Because here's what he understands better than most. Uncertainty is part of the dividend. You don't get predictable joy without unpredictable risk, and you don't build freedom without dancing a little with discomfort. You watch him stretch. He winces too much time at the workbench earlier. He makes a note in his journal to stretch more, then laughs at himself for writing it down like a recipe. It's here, in this moment of self-aware silence, that you feel the real wealth dripping in. It's not the coins, or the royalties, or the slow-growing Lisbon book deal. It's this. He doesn't wake with dread. He doesn't chase. He no longer dreams of when I make it, because he already has and didn't even notice. He's drifted into a strange stage of wealth where money arrives slower but gentler, like snow, each flake soft, predictable, enough. You think about your own world for a moment. The noise, the pressure, the hustle influencers with bleached teeth yelling about affiliate links and 6-figure funnels. Then, you picture the toy maker in his long brown cardigan sipping tea by candlelight and muttering to himself about puppet varnish, and a tiny voice in your chest says that's the empire you want, one that doesn't depend on going viral, one that works while you sleep, not because you automated everything, but because you designed it to last. In the corner of the attic, you spot a pile of wooden stamps, little seals he's carved himself, each one used to mark a shipment to prove a toy or simply say, I was here. They don't sparkle, they don't trend, but every mark is permanent, quietly, faithfully. like interest on a life well lived. The toymaker stands, yawns, stretches again. He doesn't even glance at the money drawer. He's thinking about tomorrow's walk, a new tea he wants to try, and whether he should send Annalisa in Vienna a duck wearing a top hat. You don't know how many puppets he's sold now. You stopped counting, but you do know this. His wealth isn't in what he's earned. It's in what he's kept his time, his peace, his joy, his pace. You close your eyes, not to escape the story, but to walk deeper into it. You don't notice yourself drifting. The line between reality and reverie is thin here, threadbare, like the toymaker's favorite slippers. You can still hear the scratch of his pen, but now it's more like a breeze through leaves. Light, repetitive, rhythmic, like an idea working its way through your subconscious. Down in the town square, the bakery is just starting to hum awake. A faint scent of sweet bread sneaks up the hill, all butter and warm flour. But the toymaker isn't stirring yet, because he doesn't have to. And that right there is the milestone few entrepreneurs ever reach, the moment when you can wake up slowly. He still works, sure. He still sketches, carves, writes. But now it's optional. He's achieved what some call time-rich independence, and others more poetically call Wednesday morning freedom, financial principle. Or 6, design your life for when you're no longer needed, because one day you won't be, and that's not a threat. It's a reward. The puppets and ducks still sell. The royalties still arrive. And a few of his apprentices, quiet, precise, fiercely loyal, now manage the operational tasks. He taught them everything, slowly, repeatedly, with tea breaks. One of them, Elias, once tried to convince him to use a spreadsheet. The toymaker declined gently. Spreadsheets don't smell like ink, he said. But he let Elias organize the shop anyway, let him install shelves with labels, let him digitize the shipping process only after Elias promised it would involve exactly 0 QR codes. Elias in turn proposed something bold, a Puppet of the Month subscription box. The toymaker resisted at first. People will get tired of puppets. Elias replied, people get tired of their jobs and still show up every day. They'll be fine. So they try it. 1 puppet per month each with a story. One is a tiny gondolier with movable arms. Another is a fox who wears mismatched socks. A third one accidentally has 2 noses and becomes the best-selling one. Because of course it does. That's another thing the toymakers learned. Mistakes are often the best marketing. Here's your quirky anecdote of the night. In the 1920s, a chocolatier in Belgium accidentally added too much sea salt to his caramel batch. Customers loved it. He tried to correct the flavor flaw in the next batch. Sales dropped. He put the salt back in. Sales tripled. Economists still argue whether it was sensory novelty or subconscious memory anchoring. Either way, the salt stayed. So did the double-nosed puppet. Meanwhile, the toymaker's income streams are now so layered he starts forgetting some of them. He once finds a dusty envelope in the attic with a check inside from a theater company in Prague, still paying him royalties for using his duck character in a children's play. He had entirely forgotten about that deal. And you smile, because that is the ultimate passive income dream money, arriving from things you made so long ago you barely remember giving them life. But even dreams have friction. There's tension among the apprentices. One wants to modernize more. Add a social media page. Post puppet unboxing videos. Another insists on keeping everything analog. She believes children need wooden toys, not likes. The toymaker listens, offers tea, and does what most leaders forget to do. He lets them debate without rushing to resolve it. Because as he's learned, disagreement is a dividend of success. People don't argue over what's worthless. They argue when it matters. So he drafts a quiet compromise. Each apprentice can run their own licensed microbrand under the original shop's umbrella. The whimsy workshop stays traditional. Future Folk Toys experiments online. Little Duck Lane only sells puppets with noses. Each pays royalties back to the master ledger. Each preserves part of the soul, but evolves it just a little. You pause, letting that sink in. Because there's a bigger principle floating in this scene like steam from a mug. The toy maker didn't scale by controlling everything. He scaled by designing a system with room for dissent. That's rare and brilliant, and deeply sleepy. The moon has moved now, painting a different wall of the attic. You think you hear wind, or maybe just the memory of it. One of the puppets in the corner gently swings on its string, stirred by the draft or your imagination. He writes another note in the ledger. Subscription steady. Elias wants to add socks. Theater check found. Puppet noses trending. You love how ordinary that sounds. Like someone recording rainfall, not revenue. He doesn't chase scale. He doesn't care about exponential growth or viral loops. He cares about rhythm, repeatable income, reliable partners, room to breathe, and maybe room to nap after lunch. He sits back, not to plan, not to strategize, just to enjoy. This is the unsexy side of empire building nobody talks about. The stability stage, where success gets quiet, boring even. But in that boredom, peace, sleep, freedom, you let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Because in your world, success always seems loud, urgent, frenzied. But here it's quietly self-sustaining. Not because it's passive, but because it was intentionally built to be so. A flicker of doubt passes the toy maker's brow. What if the puppets fall out of fashion? What if royalty laws change? What if the apprentices leave? Then he writes something you'll never forget. If all this vanishes tomorrow, I still win. I spent my life making joy, and joy is never wasted. You close your eyes, not because you're done, but because you're resting in a truth most people run past on the way to riches. The truth that wealth is rhythm, not volume, not noise, not fire, just rhythm. Like the ticking of the puppet's arm, like the scratching of a pen on ledger paper, like your breath slow, and even now, you're still listening, but softer. The attic blurs at the edges now like an old photograph, softened by time. You're not sure whether you're still fully here, or if you've crossed into dream territory. But it doesn't matter. The toy maker is still working, still humming that tuneless little melody, half lullaby, half memory. You're aware of a slow, pleasant heaviness settling into your limbs, a warmth in your chest like falling asleep under the weight of an old quilt. You drift, but the story catches you gently, like a hammock in motion. Tonight, he's carving a fox. Not a puppet this time, but a coin bank. Its tail curls around a slot for coins and its eyes are closed like it's dreaming. Fitting. He's not sure who asked for it. Might have been a letter from a customer. Or a dream. Hard to tell, honestly. And he doesn't care. He just builds. That's the gift. Passive income gives you not the absence of work, but the freedom to do only the work that feels like play. Financial principle. Or 7. Buy back your curiosity. You lost it once. We all do. Sometime between the 4th tax return and the 50th inbox notification, the world starts sanding down your wonder. But wealth, true wealth, is the chance to follow wonder again. Tonight it looks like a fox. He carves slowly, no deadline. no client, just rhythm. The kind that invites insight to sneak in quietly. And as wood shavings fall in delicate curls, he remembers something. A street performer once told him people don't pay for magic. They pay to believe in it. That stuck. So he never sold toys, he sold belief. That's why the puppets had names. Why the ducks had journals. Why every toy came with a tiny folded paper story tucked inside. These weren't products. They were proof that magic still mattered. And magic, it turns out, is highly profitable when treated with respect. Meanwhile, in an old drawer, a new letter waits. It's from a tiny museum in the Faroe Islands. They want to license his original puppet designs for a traveling exhibit titled Joy by Hand. It's a strange request. He's never been to the Faroes. He's not sure his work is museum material. But he says yes, because why not? Sometimes you say yes not for the money, but for the echo it sends out. Here's a fun oddity. In 18th century Denmark, there was a brief trend of making savings, dolls, wooden figures hollowed out to store coins. But if you didn't deposit weekly, the doll's expression was believed to turn sad. One banker even used them to teach children about budgeting. Economists still argue whether that was psychological manipulation or brilliant gamification. The toy maker would have loved that. He holds the Fox coin bank up to the light, turns it, smiles, then adds it to a shelf marked unnecessary but joyful. The shelf is full, a set of spinning tops that whistle. A miniature puppet stage that fits in your palm. A duck who dances only when the room is silent. None of these made him rich, but they kept him curious. And curiosity in this economy is priceless. There's tension again, this time internal. He wonders if he should stop. Not just for tonight, but in general. He's comfortable. The royalties are steady. The apprentices are capable. He's built enough. So why keep making? He asks the question aloud. The attic doesn't answer. But a puppet nods gently in the corner as if to say, because you still can. Economists still argue whether passion work in later life is about purpose or habit. Maybe it's both. But the toy maker's answer is simpler. He builds because stillness doesn't mean stasis. There's movement and joy. Even quiet joy. You think about your own stillness. Maybe that job you took just for stability. Maybe that side hustle that became a second full-time job. Maybe the dream you shelved for later, and then forgot where you shelved it. Maybe it's time to buy it back, not with money, but with margin, with space, with what the toy maker has in abundance time that is fully his own. You feel the air shift. A light rain begins tapping the roof above the attic. He leans back in his chair, fox in hand. Listens. He likes the rain. Always has. Doesn't rush to finish. Doesn't jump up to close the window. He just lets the moment happen. Because when your income is decoupled from your hours, you don't measure minutes the same way. You live inside them, instead of racing through. You notice you're breathing slower now, not because someone told you to, but because your body feels safe. That's the final dividend of passive income physiological peace. When your nervous system stops scanning for financial threats, your breath drops into your belly, your shoulders lower, your thoughts quiet, your dreams come, and you begin to remember who you were before the noise. The fox sits on the shelf now, tail curled, watching over the attic. The toy maker lights a single candle, not because he needs it, but because it's comforting. That's his version of luxury, predictable light. He reads from a book, old stories, fairy tales, not because they teach him anything new, but because they remind him who he is. He's not a mogul, not a tech founder, not a guru. He's a man who carved a life so gentle, so consistent, so beloved. It doesn't need defending, only maintaining. You yawn and it surprises you, not from boredom, but from deep relief, because you realize this isn't just a story about toys. It's a story about designing a life that lulls you back to yourself. One puppet, one duck, one idea at a time. You're still listening, but now it's through the soft veil of sleep. Somewhere between the whisper of rain and the creak of the toymaker's chair, you slip further, drifting in that space where sound becomes suggestion, and suggestion becomes sleep. The candle still flickers in the attic, throwing sleepy shadows across the toys. A marionette twitches slightly, responding to the breeze, or maybe to memory, or maybe just to you, because you're part of the story now, aren't you? You're no longer watching, you're inhabiting. You walk with the toymaker as he descends the attic stairs. Each wooden step sighs underfoot like it's been waiting all day for this moment. He heads toward the kitchen, drawn not by hunger, but by rhythm. A late cup of something warm. A ritual. This is his version of quarterly planning now. Tea silence and a pencil. He opens a small notebook. Not the ledger, just a personal one. Scribbles something across the top of the page. Next decade. Financial principle. Are great. Plan long enough to outgrow your current identity. Most people plan to survive. Some plan to thrive. Very few plan far enough to transform. He sips, then begins sketching, not toys, but systems. He's wondering what happens after him, not in the empire builder bronze statue sense, but practically. Who manages the rights to the duck designs? Who keeps the apprentices employed? Who stops the fox puppets from being turned into NFTs? That last one makes him chuckle into his tea. But it's a real question. How do you future-proof joy? This takes him down a peculiar path, one that most entrepreneurs avoid, because it sounds like paperwork and also like mortality, legacy planning, but not the flashy kind with marble plaques and charitable foundations bearing his name. No, he's thinking about quiet continuity. How to make sure his little shop doesn't become a frozen museum but a living, adapting organism. Like sourdough passed from baker to baker. Here's your quirky financial tidbit. In 2008, a family in Austria sold a 300-year-old sourdough starter for $2,000. Why? Because that strain had survived Napoleon, 2 world wars, and 5 generations of bakers. It wasn't just yeast, it was resilience. Economists still debate whether its value was biological symbolic or simply delicious. The toymaker's work is like that, not scalable in the way of apps or franchises, but transmissible. You don't mass-produce soul. You apprentice it. He drafts a clause. Each apprentice who starts a new line of toys must write a short story to accompany their first creation. Not optional. Stories preserve the spark, he murmurs. There's a second clause. Royalties must always be split 80-20 in favor of the maker, not the platform, not the distributor. Craft must be profitable or it disappears. He stares at that sentence a long time. There's tension again, because he wonders, is it too idealistic? He hears Elias's voice in his head. People want cheap toys, not manifestos. And yet, maybe the world changes because a few stubborn craftspeople keep insisting on value. He closes the notebook, not because he's finished, just because he's made enough progress to sleep on it. Another principle: decisions left to dreams often return more whole. He steps outside, now mug still in hand, onto the back porch. The rain has stopped, but the scent of it lingers earthy and clean. He watches mist rise over the hills. Somewhere far away, a train passes a sound so gentle, it feels like someone dragging a zipper through the sky. He smiles, because his toys are on that train, shipped without him, sold while he sleeps. This was the milestone that once felt mythical money moving without human hands. But now it's real, tangible, normal. He built it, not in a rush, but in layers. One puppet, one journal, one licensing agreement. He remembers the first time a check arrived while he was sick in bed. It felt like magic, but it wasn't magic. It was structure. This is something nobody tells you early on. Systems feel boring when you build them, and sacred once they work. You think of your own systems, or maybe the lack of them, and you wonder gently, dreamily what part of your life could keep moving, even when you don't. Maybe it's time to build your first asset, or finish that ebook, or license that idea that's been sitting in your drawer. Because passive income doesn't mean no work. It means work once benefit many. That's the miracle the toy maker discovered. Not quick, not flashy, but real. He yawns. You do too. You imagine him brushing his teeth, setting the mug in the sink. You follow the rhythm of a day closing itself gently. You realize this section isn't a climax. It's a pause, the kind that only shows up in stories that are secure enough to rest. There's no rush, no pitch, no twist, just continuity, curiosity, a candle going out in a room full of puppets who just for tonight seem almost alive. You're listening still, but barely. Your breath is the only rhythm you notice now. Like the toy maker's knife on wood. Like royalties on repeat. Like peace bought in small, steady payments over time. There's nothing urgent left tonight. You've already arrived. By now, you may have noticed your eyelids feel heavier, but your thoughts feel lighter. You've followed the toy maker down the spiral staircase of his life, through the grain of his workbench. The soft glow of royalty checks the hum of machines that don't demand his attention. And yet, the most compelling part, he never once chased scale. He chased sense, and in a world addicted to louder, bigger, faster, sense is a rebellious act. Tonight, you follow him into town, not for errands, not for meetings, just to sit. He walks to a small park near the old train station. There's a bench under a fig tree worn smooth from decades of daydreamers. It's quiet here. No phones, just the breeze flirting with leaves and the occasional sound of children negotiating the rules of a game no adult understands. This is the toy maker's real office. Financial Principle, Lurker 9. Observe where value gathers when you're not looking. He watches a little girl playing with one of his older toys, a clunky, wind-up frog that jumps in awkward arcs. It was never a bestseller. Too unpredictable. Too analog. But she's giggling like it's the only toy in the world. Sometimes joy doesn't scale. Sometimes it shouldn't. A man on the next bench leans over and asks, "Did you make that?" The toy maker shrugs. "A long time ago." The man smiles. "My son had one just like it." That's the moment. Not the licensing deal, not the passive income chart. This, the invisible dividend of value created once, but remembered forever. Quirky money, anecdote of the night. In ancient China, shopkeepers used personalized clay seals to mark their goods. Some of these seals were passed down for centuries, becoming more valuable than the wares themselves. Economists debate whether the value was in the brand, the lineage, or the lore. But what's clear is this meaning accumulates. The toy maker understands this instinctively. It's why he never outsourced the stories. Sure, an intern could write product copy, but only he knew that the fox puppet was based on his childhood dog. Only he remembered that the duck's name came from a sailor's tale overheard in a storm. The stories aren't just decoration, they are assets, emotional, intangible, compoundable. That's another truth. He learned late narrative equity outperforms most portfolios. He rises from the bench, gives the fig tree a little pat, and walks slowly through the market street. It's not tourist season, so most of the stalls are closed. But one remains open, a small booth that sells candles and incense. He stops, smiles. It's run by Mira, one of his early apprentices. She's carved out her own niche, scented wax animals that melt to reveal tiny charms inside. Completely impractical, utterly charming, highly profitable. Mira beams when she sees him. "You know," she says, "people still think you run everything." He chuckles. "Let them." Makes the magic feel bigger. She nods. "I'm thinking of licensing my candle molds. India and Portugal are asking." "Do it," he says. "Make sure you own the rights." And the story. They don't say goodbye. Just a shared look of, "we know." He walks on. Back home, he feeds the cat. The cat, for the record, is named Dividend. It was a joke at first. But now, every time he calls for her, "Here, Dividend," he laughs at how fitting it's become. She's low maintenance, always appears around mealtime, and occasionally brings small, strange gifts to his doorstep. Much like his portfolio, you feel it now, the gentle loop of his life. It's not about escape. He didn't build passive income to leave his world behind. He built it to stay closer to it, to notice the frog in the park, to hear Mira's voice evolve from apprentice to entrepreneur, to remember that the wealthiest people aren't the ones who've built the biggest ladders, but the ones who no longer need to climb. There's a debate among economists still unresolved about whether passive income promotes laziness or enables excellence, whether it spoils ambition or refines it. The toy maker would say it reveals it. When you're not scrambling for rent, your real interests surface. When you're not exhausted by the hamster wheel, you remember you once loved to draw. When your money works for you, you begin to remember how to be you again. He lights a candle. Dividend curls beside it. The room grows amber and slow. There's no performance here. No social media. No rise and grind slogans tattooed on mugs. Just a man who made enough to rest and chose to keep making anyway. That's the twist no one tells you. Passive income doesn't free you from work. It frees you to choose better work. And better work doesn't always look like strategy decks or exit valuations. Sometimes it looks like a puppet that winks, a fox that guards your coins, a duck who only dances when no one's watching. You can feel your breath sinking to his rhythm again. Even in your world of deadlines and dings, there's a quiet part of you that still believes in making for the sake of making. And now, just maybe you believe it could also fund your life. So, as Dividend purrs and the candle gutters and the night gathers its softest sounds, you begin to wonder, what would you build if you didn't have to rush? What would you preserve if you could step out of the algorithm's churn? What part of your soul could you sneak back into the market wrapped in a story and sold gently night after night to those who still believe in foxes? You'll sleep on it. You're already halfway there. There's a soft ache in your shoulders now, the kind that only arrives when something inside you has begun to unclench. You're still with the toy maker, though the sky has shifted. A darker shade now. The stars are out, but not in a showy way, just scattered quiet brilliance, like dots of possibility across a sleepy spreadsheet. He's back in his attic. The toys are still. The ledger is closed. The mug has been rinsed and placed just so. And yet, there's work to do. But this time, the work isn't manual. It's mental. It's the work of refinement. Financial principle. 10. Wealth isn't just what you build, it's what you protect and prune. The toy maker opens a drawer and pulls out an envelope filled with index cards. Each card holds an idea. Some, drawn some, described a few stained with T, many obsolete. One says pogo stick crocodile. Doesn't not make sense. Another, subscription toy club seasonal boxes bundled with bedtime stories. He sifts, reads, sets some aside. This is his version of quarterly review. Not just asking what's next, but asking what no longer fits. In the beginning, he clung to every idea like it was gold. But now he knows some gold just weighs you down. Quirky money. Anecdote. The Roman Emperor Augustus once declared a wealth purge, asking citizens to melt down ornamental gold and silver to support the empire. But many refused because their treasures weren't just metal. They were memories, heirlooms, identity. Economists still debate if this was sound macroeconomics or just gilded desperation. The toy maker wonders the same, staring at an old sketch of a mechanized toy theater. Beautiful, complex, completely unprofitable. He files it under never again, but still love you. Because pruning isn't rejection, it's respect for energy. He leans back, notebook on his chest, and drifts through the branches of thought like he's back in the fig tree. He remembers when he had no systems, when every decision felt like a storm, when to raise prices, when to say no, when to pause a line that wasn't selling, even if it was a personal favorite. He used to think success was adding. Now he knows success is selective subtraction. Less noise, fewer SKUs, simpler contracts, cleaner inboxes, better sleep. Your mind floats to your own mental attic. What's in your drawer of half-built ideas? Which ones feel like obligations dressed up as goals? Which ones, if you were very honest, just aren't yours anymore? You don't have to burn them. Just bless them. Then archive them. You're learning from the toy maker now, not just how to earn, but how to shed with grace. There's power in that. Quiet power. He closes the envelope, places it beside a photo him and Elias years ago, before the workshop grew into a network. He smiles. They still talk. Not about profit margins anymore. More about weather, grandchildren, pensions, legacy, and whether frogs or foxes had the better Q4. Tonight, though, it's just the toy maker and the moonlight. A partnership older than most. He lights a single incense stick, one of Myra's creations. It smells like cedar and something vaguely nostalgic, like the inside of a toy chest you opened once in childhood and never forgot. He sits. He breathes. He's not optimizing, he's being. Here's what nobody tells you until it's too late. Once you have enough more is a dangerous drug. It whispers one more launch, one more funnel, one more zero. But the toy maker, he listens for different whispers now. The whisper of ease, the hush of enough, the silence of systems humming quietly while he dreams. You feel that silence now. It's not emptiness, it's invitation. And maybe, just maybe, you're allowed to create things that feed your life without consuming it. Economists argue, should you reinvest everything or take profits early? The toy maker says, take just enough to savor. Leave enough to grow. Because joy is not deferred gratification. It's measured access. He reaches for one more card. Blank. Writes just 3 words. Next wax owl bank. Smiles. You're not sure why that's so perfect. But it is. The owl. The wax. The surprise inside. Another tiny story waiting to compound. Maybe the owl holds coins. Maybe wisdom. Maybe both. You let yourself imagine what's inside your next owl, and maybe tomorrow you'll sketch it. Not to sell, just to start. Your breath slows again. Your body knows the rhythm now. This isn't a story about a man who got rich fast. It's a lullaby about how deliberate slowness can be the ultimate leverage. You're allowed to go slow too, to delete ideas, to fund only what delights you, to say this month I'll prune not planned. The toy maker stretches, sets down the candle snuffer and lets the room fall dark. His toys will wait. His empire quiet, strange loving needs nothing from him tonight. And maybe yours doesn't either. The kind of stillness that only comes when the work is done, not finished necessarily, but done enough. The moonlight has softened. Dividend has vanished, likely curled in some secret corner. And the toy maker wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of wood shavings. And time leans into the chair that has molded itself to his shape. And you're not just watching anymore. You're resting in parallel. Because this next part isn't about building. It's about the after. The strange, often awkward art of receiving. Financial principle. Factor 11. Passive income isn't just earned. It must be allowed. You think that sounds easy. But for many, it's the hardest part. Letting the money come in without chasing it. Letting the systems operate without tinkering daily. Letting yourself rest without guilt. The toy maker had to learn that lesson too. There was a time not too long ago when he kept pretending to be busy. Not because the work demanded it, but because he wasn't sure who he was when he wasn't producing. And yet the royalty checks still came. From Denmark, from Brazil, from a remote town in Alberta that sold 32 plush pelicans in a single week for no apparent reason. He didn't understand it. He didn't try to. He just let it arrive. Quirky money anecdote. In medieval Japan, samurai often received stipends paid not in coins, but in koku, a measure of rice. 1 koku was enough to feed a man for a year, and yet many samurai lived modestly and stored their rice, letting it quietly grow in value. Historians still argue whether they were frugal, strategic, or just suspicious of coinage. But the principle holds. Sometimes the best return is in what you don't immediately consume. The toy maker took this to heart. When the licensing income surged in year 7, he didn't upgrade his life. No new car, no second home, no designer bathrobe. Instead, he upgraded his margin. Not profit margin, though, that too, but life margin. More space between decisions. More buffer between yes and no. More mornings where he didn't need to know what day it was. He bought back his mornings first. That was the first real luxury. He realized he didn't need to wake with the markets, didn't need to track conversions, didn't need to check his inbox before his coffee. Instead, he wandered. Not metaphorically. He literally wandered through flea markets, coastal trails, used bookstores where he always left with one item he'd never heard of. That's where he found the antique banker's lamp now perched in the corner. It still works, still smells faintly of the 1930s. He liked to think someone once balanced ledgers by its light. Now it illuminates sketches of animals that make no financial sense, and yet, somehow, fund his entire life. You let that truth wrap around you, that the most profitable things might not look like profit, that the quietest parts of your day, your doodles, your thoughts, your long wandering walks, might be the seeds of something vast and rich and durable. There's a paradox here, one that economists continue to bicker about in long papers with too many footnotes. Is wealth better measured by accumulation or liberation? The toy maker says freedom every time. He still earns, but he doesn't chase. He still creates, but without obligation. And yes, he still markets, but only when it feels like storytelling, not posturing. There's a difference. He once received a letter from a mother in Croatia whose son slept every night with one of his stuffed owls. The letter ended simply, "Thank you for making something gentle." He kept that letter on the wall for years because it reminded him value isn't always visible. You breathe that in, you feel how your own earnings might carry invisible impact. Maybe someone still wears the bracelet you sold on Etsy. Maybe a blog post you forgot you wrote helped someone change careers. Maybe your old course keeps showing up in inboxes of people who've never heard your voice but trust it all the same. Passive income is strange like that. It multiplies without asking permission. It echoes through time like lullabies written once and sung forever. You remember the wax owl bank? It sold out last month. He didn't promote it. Mira did quietly through a soft focus video of the owl melting, revealing a gold-painted key. No funnel, no urgency, just magic. That's the real secret he keeps discovering. People will pay for what they trust. They'll return for what they feel. And they'll whisper about what made them smile. Even while you sleep, even while you rest, you realize now that receiving isn't passive. It's deliberate stillness. And maybe tomorrow, or the day after, you'll build a better welcome mat for your own earnings. Not a hustle, not a sprint, just a gentle inbox, a quiet ping, a check that clears while you're watching clouds drift across a lazy sky. The toy maker yawns. You do too. That's enough for tonight. The empire hums quietly beneath him. He did his part. Now the systems and the stories carry the rest. You're deeper now. Not just into the story, but into something softer, something cellular. You've gone from watching the toy maker to absorbing his pace, his filters, his odd but precise view of what matters. And here, as a breeze presses lightly against the attic window, something shifts again. Because this chapter is about legacy, financial principle. Doctrine 12. True wealth builds without you, and long after you. The toy maker didn't always think this way. Early on, legacy sounded like a marketing gimmick or a dusty family crest. But one night, much like this one, he stayed up tracing the outline of a wooden turtle. And he wondered, will anyone care about these toys when I'm gone? It wasn't a morbid thought, just spacious. The kind of thought that emerges when your debts are paid, your fridge is full, and your days are more curious than crowded. He thought about Elias, about Mira, about Dividend the owl, technically immortal, and then about a child in South Africa who named her Stuffed Fox Investor. That one made him laugh for weeks. Quirky money anecdote. In 18th century Italy, children born into merchant families were often gifted a single silver coin at birth, engraved with a family seal. But the true gift was the ledger access they received at age 12, allowing them to see how the family money had moved for generations. Historians still debate whether this transparency created resilience or a bit of trauma. Imagine being 14 and knowing your uncle blew 400 lira on goat cheese futures. The toy maker didn't have children of his own, but he'd long stopped thinking legacy was about DNA. He had digital children, now products, systems, templates, stories. Each one built to outlive him and to serve beyond him. So he made decisions with that in mind. Would this contract make sense in 20 years? Could this process still run if he disappeared tomorrow? Would this idea make someone smile in a country he's never seen? He didn't automate to avoid effort. he automated to extend intention. That's what most people get wrong. They think systems are soulless, but for the Toymaker, systems are just love letters in motion. Like the royalty tracking software he helped build with a retired accountant named Melvin, or the toy repair guide he published for free in 6 languages. Each of these tiny echoes of care. And over time, those echoes stack. Wealth isn't just income, it's momentum in your absence. You picture it now, your own work continuing without you. Not abandoned, not faded, just sustaining. Maybe it's a shop that still ships your printables. Maybe a course that auto-enrolls new learners each month. Maybe a slow-drip podcast that keeps collecting ad revenue long after you've stopped recording. And maybe it doesn't need to be huge. Legacy isn't scale. It's stability plus meaning times time. And time in this attic feels both endless and weightless. The Toymaker isn't hustling for his name to be remembered. He's ensuring that his work remains useful. He once told Mira, "If one of my toys is still in use 50 years from now, I've done better than most CEOs." She replied, "Only if it still makes that funny squeaking noise." He smiled. He added a backup squeaker. Because legacy, like wealth, requires maintenance. You remember the Owl Bank again. Not just as a product, but a vessel. Someone in Tokyo just created a YouTube channel, unboxing wax toys and reading the stories hidden inside. The algorithm caught it. A spike in sales followed. The Toymaker never asked for it. He simply enabled it. Legacy thrives in permission. Economists sometimes argue about the value of estate planning. Some say it's hoarding. Others say it's responsible stewardship. But neither side talks much about emotional utility. The quiet glow of knowing your ideas might continue helping people you'll never meet. The Toymaker does. He keeps a notebook labeled "After I'm Gone," inside not legal instructions, but winks, a list of toy concepts to be released posthumously, a sealed envelope with a riddle to unlock a special collection, and a note that simply reads, "If you found this well done, enjoy the elephant that folds into a boat." Because legacy doesn't have to be heavy. It can be funny, playful, even absurd. And maybe that's what helps it last. Because meaning sticks when it's delightful. You feel your own shoulders loosen again. Maybe you don't need to build a monument. Just a little machine of kindness that works without you. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's better. The Toymaker stands, stretches, and walks downstairs. His slippers whisper against the wood. He stops by the mail shelf. A letter from Mira. A new distributor inquiry. And a drawing from a 5-year-old named Paolo. A picture of a robot horse hybrid with the caption, "This is Harold." He flies, but mostly naps. He tacks it to the wall, then writes one note to himself. Harold Plush. Built-in nap setting. 2027. That's legacy. A nap-powered robot named Harold that doesn't exist yet, but will. And a Toymaker who doesn't need to be around for the joy to arrive. You smile into the dark. The moonlight glints off a tiny bell beside the door. Everything for tonight is in place. The wealth is still moving, and you're floating right along with it. The attic quiets, and even the wood seems to sigh. You're so deep into this dream now, it's hard to say whether the Toymaker is moving, or if you are. At this stage, you're not merely a witness, you're part of the ecosystem. You've absorbed the rhythms, the gentle scaling, the empire that runs on story systems and stuffed owls. But tonight, something new flickers at the edge of awareness, a truth many avoid until it's too late. Wealth isn't linear. It loops, and sometimes it dips, Financial principle 213. Every fortune includes a winter. Prepare for it like a gardener. You'd think by now the toy maker's income streams would be untouchable, but that's not how it works. Even plush pelicans face recessions. One year, let's call it year 9, the supplier in Estonia went bankrupt. The warehouse in Maine flooded. Mira caught pneumonia and was offline for weeks. And to top it all off, an AI startup launched a line of algorithmically optimized toys that weren't very fun, but were cheap and shiny. Sales plummeted. The toy maker, already several steps removed from daily operations, found himself watching numbers drop like autumn leaves. And the strangest part, he didn't panic, because he'd planned for this long ago. Quirky money anecdote. In 1600s, France merchants commonly buried small jars of coins in the roots of olive trees. They called them sleeping vaults, not for theft protection, but as a psychological comfort. If the markets crashed, they knew their tree would eventually bear fruit, and their coin stash would still be there. To this day, farmers occasionally unearth them, and debates rage over whether these should count as found treasure or as taxable income. France leans yes. Of course, the toy maker had his own version of sleeping vaults, not buried, but built into the structure of his empire. A disaster protocol, an oh-no fund, an emergency toy line called the Crisis Critters that could be manufactured in 2 weeks flat using only local materials and zero overseas dependency. He activated it once. The packaging featured tiny plush creatures with slightly anxious expressions, a fox with a scarf, a porcupine holding a coffee mug, a mole reading a newspaper with wide eyes. They sold out in 4 days, because turns out people love toys that admit things are a little weird right now. But that wasn't the real win. The real win was how ready he felt. He didn't scramble. He didn't burn out. He didn't borrow. Because he hadn't designed his systems for growth at all costs. He'd designed them for durability. And this is where most would-be passive income empires fall apart. They ride the high seasons. They forget the frost is coming. And when it does, they flinch, they fire, they fold. But the toy maker just switched gloves. He leaned into the slow months, repaired old tools, tested new materials, and yes, even napped more. Because sometimes the best thing a business can do during a downturn is hibernate. Economists are still divided on whether recessions are purely destructive or whether they serve as forced audits, reminders to prune what no longer fits. But anyone who's ever gardened knows the soil needs cold to reset. The toy maker knew that, so he used the dip as a listening season. He read every customer email, revisited his first sketches, asked hard questions like, does anyone really need a slingshot shaped like a llama? It was retired, mercifully, and when things stabilized, he didn't scale recklessly. He scaled thoughtfully, with extra margin, wider buffers, and a rule: no new launches during flu season. You breathe that in, not just the caution but the wisdom, because you've had winters too. The project that didn't take off, the job that evaporated overnight, the savings you had to tap earlier than planned, and maybe back then it felt like failure. But now, listening to the wind nudge the window frame, you wonder, what if that was just compost, not waste, but fuel, waiting to become something richer in the next season? The toy maker thinks so. He keeps a folder labeled Frost Files. Inside, ideas that didn't work yet, toys that flopped, stories no one read, products too early or just too weird. He calls them sleepers, not discarded, just dormant. And every spring he opens the folder. he picks one. He tries again. Sometimes the market is finally ready. Sometimes it still isn't. But he never deletes the folder, because in a loop-based wealth system, failure is fertilizer. You imagine your own frost file. What would you revive? What idea just needs a different season? Maybe it's not time yet. That's okay. Winter isn't the end. It's the hush before the bloom. The toy maker understands this. So does Dividend, who now snores softly on a shelf, one feathered foot, twitching in a plushy dream. You settle deeper, not just into rest, but into resilience, because you're no longer afraid of downturns. You've learned from the toy maker. They're not defeats, they're invitations, and spring always follows, even in empires made of felt and fabric, even in dreams like this one. Outside, the wind softens into silence. Even the shadows stretch thinner now, as if reluctant to disturb the stillness. You are a breath away from weightlessness, floating inside the lullaby of loop systems, plush legacies, and now something deeper. Still, because the empire the toy maker built wasn't just made of toys, it was made of trust, financial principle. Ducker 14. Relationships scale wealth more reliably than effort alone. This part, oddly enough, took him the longest to learn. In the early years, he was a quiet fortress. The kind of person who'd rather sew 50 prototypes himself than ask someone else to mail a single one. But over time, he saw what happened when he opened up his little world. Not to everyone, just to the right ones. Mira was the first. Then came Damaris, the Norwegian distributor with a soft spot for penguin-shaped calculators. Then Harold, a former customs officer, who now handled global logistics and occasionally sent funny cat videos. Each person added a thread to the fabric. The toy maker learned to delegate, then disappear, not in a ghosting kind of way. In a trust-fueled you've got this kind of way. Quirky, money, anecdote. In ancient Japan, some merchants used a practice called shadow stewardship. When stepping back from their businesses, they'd appoint a successor, then secretly monitor progress for 100 days before formally handing over the reins. If the apprentice handled a full moon cycle without scandal, they'd receive a ceremonial inkstone representing clear communication. Historians still debate whether this was brilliant mentorship or just high-functioning micromanagement in a kimono. The toy maker didn't use inkstones, but he did follow his own version of that cycle. He'd test team leads by letting them run one launch solo. He'd observe quietly. He'd offer notes, never criticism. Then he'd vanish again for a week, usually to a cabin or a ferry or an antique shop with terrible Wi-Fi and excellent pastries. Because trust when practiced compounds faster than interest. And unlike capital trust, doesn't devalue in crisis. It deepens. When Estonia collapsed, it was Damaris who rerouted shipments through Latvia in under 48 hours. When the main flood hit, it was Harold who had emergency warehousing lined up before sunrise. The toy maker never raised his voice, never made a dramatic call. He just let people shine. That became a pattern. He shared revenue fairly, gave generous creative control, and built in what he called mistake buffers, extra time and budget space, so team members could recover from errors without panic. The result, loyalty that outlived contracts, and a business that scaled not on the back of hustle, but on the shoulders of mutual respect. This is the part gurus tend to skip. They'll teach you automation, they'll teach you leverage, but very few teach you to build with people not just around them. Economists are torn about the founder myth, the idea that a lone visionary creates and owns it all. Some argue that's how incentives stay aligned. Others say it breeds brittle systems. But the toymaker never wanted to be a solo statue. He wanted to be a node in a generous network. So, when he was offered a buyout twice, actually, he turned it down. Not because the number was wrong, because the deal would have broken the network, flattened it into quarterly reports and KPI dashboards. He chose instead to slowly exit without ejecting, to keep a soft hand on the wheel, and to let his people, own. You picture that now. What if your own income machine was less solo act, more ensemble, not just contractors but co-dreamers? What would you build with a small, strange, gifted group? What systems would you trust them to run? Maybe it's the Etsy shop you stop micromanaging. Maybe it's the publishing schedule you finally outsource. Maybe it's the community garden that somehow sells jam online now. Doesn't matter what it is. What matters is shared stakes. Even Dividend the Owl understands this. He now hosts quarterly idea meetings with plush mice, a frog from accounting, and a teacup that may or may not be sentient. They mostly nap through it. But that's kind of the point, because true trust feels like permission to relax. And the toymaker, he relaxes a lot these days. He reads more fiction. He walks slower. He bakes sourdough terribly. He's become less of a founder, more of a gardener again. And every time he thinks about scaling something new, he asks the same question. Who gets to grow with me? It's a simple prompt. But it's the reason the empire hasn't crumbled. It's the reason people keep showing up. And it's the reason that even when he's silent for months, the income still flows. Because relationships, when built with care, become their own kind of engine. And tonight, in this gentle quiet that might be the most comforting truth of all, you're not alone in this. You were never meant to be. And just like Dividend, you're allowed to snore in a meeting every now and then. Somewhere in the distance, a clock doesn't tick. It doesn't have to. Time here has loosened its grip. Even your breath feels more like a ripple now, a feather on still water. And in this final stretch of our story, the toymaker is nowhere and everywhere. His empire hums quietly in the background, a clockwork dream made of tiny, stitched faces. Sleepy logistics and passive income that doesn't just sustain but soothes. Not an empire of noise, an empire of enough financial principle. Just not 15. At some point, the chase ends not with a bang, but with stillness. You don't hear that one often, do you? Most advice says push harder, build faster, 10x your hustle or perish in obscurity. But no one talks about how to stop building or what it means to have enough and know it. That's where we are now. Because after decades of quiet, strategy-scaled wonder and owl-led ideation sessions, the toymaker finally did something radical. He stopped optimizing, not because he ran out of ideas, because he recognized the goal was never domination. The goal was liberation, quirky money. Anecdote. The Stoic philosopher Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in ancient Rome. But every few months he'd sleep on the floor, eat only bread, and wear coarse clothes, not out of guilt, but practice. He'd ask himself, is this the condition I so feared? His point, if you can find comfort in less, you're no longer owned by more. Seneca also believed in diversified investments and passive real estate income. Philosophers surprisingly savvy. The toymaker didn't sleep on floors, but he did downsize. Not his life, his urgency. He let go of the compulsion to scale forever. He let the systems hum quietly, self-correcting, and subtly self-healing like good soil. And when people asked him, what's next, he'd shrug, not out of boredom, out of contentment. You see, a passive income empire only matters if it leads you back to yourself, to your soft mornings, to your silly projects, to your unread books and unwalked trails and unresolved questions. Economists debate whether enough is even measurable, whether it's income divided by desires or just a philosophical illusion. But the toy maker, he defined it this way. Enough is when your days stop feeling borrowed. He now wakes without an alarm, eats lunch when he's hungry, not scheduled, and sometimes forgets what day it is in the best possible way. The toys still sell, the accounts still refill, but his attention is no longer in the machinery. It's in the margin, and tonight yours can be too. Imagine it your own version of enough. Not a finish line, but a foggy little clearing where you stop racing, where you sip your tea a little slower, where the money works for you and you just are. This doesn't mean you stop creating. It just means you stop creating from lack. You create because it's fun again, like the toy maker did once he knew the empire would stand without him. He made a wind-up elephant that blows bubbles, not for profit, just because he could. And maybe you write a book, or open a retreat, or nap. The point isn't the project. It's the freedom to choose. And that's what this entire sleepy journey has been leading to. Not the empire, the ease. And now your breath drifts longer. Your muscles forget their to-do lists. And somewhere in the background, Dividend the owl hoots one last time, a soft little whisper, like a bedtime bell. He'll keep watch. The systems will hum. And you're free to let go now. Drift softly. Float forward. No more hustle tonight. You've planted enough. You've looped through learning and laughed through failures and listened deeply to dreams with thread in their seams. And now it's time to land in a place beyond scale, a place called rest. So now, as the last edges of wakefulness slip quietly past, you feel your limbs soften like fabric laid gently over a warm chair. There's nothing left to solve tonight, nothing to prove or push or polish. You've wandered through systems and stories, feathered prophets, and plush resilience. And now you can let the background hum hold you. Imagine a tiny attic again, high above some sleepy town. The light is low. The air smells like cedar and cinnamon. And on the workbench, a half-finished toy smiles crookedly, waiting for tomorrow. But tonight all is paused. Your empire can wait. Your plans can wait. Even time itself has curled up for a nap. So you sink deeper into the hush. Feel it wrap around your shoulders like a well-worn shawl. You've built enough for now. You've dreamed enough for now. And your subconscious, clever thing is already knitting new visions while you sleep. You don't need to chase them. Just rest, receive, float. You are safe here. You are spacious here. And tomorrow will meet you gently as a toy maker's touch on velvet thread, as gently as a plush owl blinking in the dawn, as gently as wealth that waits without demand. Soften your breath, loosen your grip. The world is quieter now, and you are home.